Hi, I'm with Merissa Silk, product lead at Fundingport, who is here for our Prod MBA Virtual Leadership Summit series, where we are speaking to effective product leaders about what it really means to lead in the product world. So, hi, Merissa, how are you?
Hi, Henry. Thanks for having me.
I had a nice chat before, anyway, just for an intro. So I thought I'd start with a bit of research that I did. So I was doing a bit of research for our conversation earlier and came across your LinkedIn, just sort of obviously seeing if I haven't missed anything since we last spoke. And personally, I always like digging into the recommendation section. I think it tells quite a lot about a person. Not very good in my case. I think I've only given one or two recommendations, but anyway, in your case, it did. And just to quote one. So firstly, you have 27 received, and you've given 23 yourself, which is maybe sounds like a vanity metric, but again, I think it shows something good going on if people have gone to the effort, or you're very good at chasing them up. And I'm just going to read from one of them that I think really highlighted some of your product leadership qualities. So one of them mentioned, quote, Merissa is the product manager every product should have. Terms like proactive, a caring leader. She never stops questioning how to improve something, very organized, calm, and straight to the point. So lots of things there. What do you think makes an effective product leader? What do you think makes you an effective product leader?
That's a great and tough question to answer. I think, to be honest, if I were to be asked the same question every day for a week, I think I would give a totally different answer depending on the day. But I think at the end of the day, product leaders, or even just even if you're more junior in product management, I think your job is really to be a hub at the center of things. So basically what you have to do is connect all parts of the organization in order to make your product come to life and then do well in the market. And so product leaders need to be able to be that sort of connection point for technical people, for design people, for business people, for your users, all different types of groups that, to be honest, historically in the workplace are not that used to working together or talking to one another or even knowing that those other parts of the company exist. And so the product person has to bring all of these groups together and sort of make it happen in whatever way that they can. And this is what I think product leadership is really about at its core.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting topic. I mean, this is why I partly wanted to do this series. It's just so nuanced, but it's so in a way counterintuitive, I feel, to more junior people, because I feel like when you start out, the narrative is product management is about efficiency, right? You have this clear, ultimately you see it, and it's incentivized in many cases around efficiency and getting tickets done and building lots of features quickly, like the typical feature factory. And the more senior you speak to people, the more they're just it's really not about the processes. It's just how do you try and herd this sort of messy thing, right, in a world where there's a moving target and there's a lot of uncertainty, and how do you sort of shepherd everything in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think junior product management, or even product management in immature organizations as well, is really just about that kind of task management, right? Reading tickets and watching them move across a Kanban board, and that's product management.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that that's not what it's about whatsoever. I think really it is about facilitating those connection points, because at the end of the day, if you consider yourself to be this hub and this facilitator, and you're connecting one person to the next, to the next, to the next, then you get those efficiency gains as a byproduct. Tickets will move across the Kanban board as a byproduct if you're facilitating the right conversations and connecting the right people at the right moment in time, which is not an easy feat, because it's you have to have eyes literally all covering your head, and have to have a view on all things and all people, spotting opportunities and thinking, oh, this would go better if this person talked to this person, or this person talked to this person. And I think that that's something that takes a lot of practice, actually.
Yeah, for sure. But again, it touches upon these really unquantifiable thing. I mean, we use the word soft skills, which I think does it a massive disservice, because those are the skills, those are the core skills. On one side, you touched upon it there. It's tasks will get done if your team is, for example, like motivated, if they have a clear goal. If you simply like say, good job and give encouragement and guidance, like those are things that really move the needle, but aren't quantifiable firstly. And then on the other side, this is something I talked about a lot in my book last year, is around self-management. I think things like, more so now as working as an entrepreneur, but I think things like, meditation, like reflection, journaling, reading philosophy, like these kinds of things are so powerful, because as you said, it's about how do you see the dots in the first place that you need to connect, rather than just looking at, what's right in your face, which may be like, oh shit, we need to get, these 10 tasks done today, for example.
I think that that's a really good point, actually. And I worry that like modern day product managers get caught in like the frenzy of things, right? Yeah. Especially with everyone working from home, it's even worse because you have like 1,000 tools sending you notifications every 3 seconds. I definitely do. And for me, I've always been a PM who kind of likes the context switching. I like bouncing between all of those 300 messages. It's no problem. But I know that a lot of people can't function like that, or they don't want to. And if that's like the nature of your day, so say from 9 until 5:30 or 6 p.m., you're just like responding to notifications. If you don't try really hard to carve out the space in your day, or like either before or after your work day, for that breathing room for your brain to like connect things for you, it happens by itself. That's what your brain does. It happens when you sleep. It happens when you slightly distract yourself. That's why people talk about like shower thoughts, or, I thought of this when I was taking a walk. And as a PM, if you don't create that space in your day for meditation, or just, looking away from your screen for some moments, those connections won't happen by themselves the way that they were meant to. And I think, like you're saying, meditation is a really great way. If you say, okay, like I'm going to walk away from my computer and I'm going to take this space for myself, I can almost guarantee that when you come back to your desk, something really amazing is going to happen in your workday.
Yeah, 100%. Also on that topic, obviously there's like fetishization of meditation, and the sort of vipassana, like sitting, breathing, focusing on breathing. But it doesn't need to be that. Things like, for example, just taking a walk for a couple of minutes, like popping down the road to like buy an ice cream or a coffee, that kind of thing is, as you said, just giving you a bit of space to allow those neural connections to make. Any specific tactics that you use? Particularly as someone, because I'm the opposite. I'm like, nobody talked to me before like 11. I'm in the zone, which sometimes makes it harder to be a product manager.
I think, yeah. So definitely, it was. I'm one of those people that I think has this kind of time before, like in the morning, either before I'm like really awake or right before I go to sleep, where I'm like kind of half asleep, where I'm pretty sure that I am the smartest version of myself. It's always been like this, where I'm having like my most genius moments, like right when I wake up or right before I go to sleep. Yeah. And this is sometimes disruptive because depending on how excited I feel by this thought, then sometimes I can't fall asleep because all I want to do is like think through a problem I just solved, which means that I also have pretty bad insomnia from this, but that's okay. So what happens is usually I have to like write it down so that I don't lose it, because sometimes I'm not in a position or a place where I can think it through. When I was living in Sydney, I walked to and from work, and this was like a great time for like this kind of organic genius light bulb moments to happen during my day. So then I would, like stumble on the sidewalk because I was texting myself because I didn't want to forget my great idea. This is kind of the downside, but for me, it's definitely these kinds of quiet moments at home when I'm by myself, or, walking to and from work, or just stepping away from my desk for a moment, where it just sort of gives that space. And I don't know, smart things happen, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I notice it working for myself, like you see it, because there's no incentive to work hard, right? There's just an incentive to deliver results. So you have to I've constant struggle with this, but I find I'm in a constant tension between like trying to work really hard, but going like, I know that, for example, like if I'm trying to come up with a, let's say a welcome email for this sales sequence, that I am going to do a way better job if I just go and take, literally a small Post-it and go and sit outside with the coffee, or if I go and cycle to my co-working space, then do the email, and then even cycle back like 20 minutes later, because it is that again, that space where you're going to be creative, like you're getting yourself in the right environment. Your mind is thinking about these things without worrying about the 50 other things you have on your list. So you really notice it when you work for yourself. And I think that's why I always recommend to people, like, just at some point take a couple of months out. Like, you don't need to start a business, but just do something. Maybe it's like, I'm going to write a series of articles, because again, you will realize that you're not going to be good at writing if you sit down for 12 hours a day or like 14 hours a day. Like, you are going to be better if you just do 15 minutes. That's it. And I think getting into that habit is really, really, really useful.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that in the case of product management, this kind of if you choose not to take that space in your day, like, I think that there's a much bigger risk in the results compared to maybe other roles, actually. And of course, I've been a product manager my whole career, and I'm very biased, but the thing is that, product management is hard because you have to both be in all of the details, and you also have to play like a high level strategic function. And if you don't create that space, actually you're going to be bad at both, but you're definitely going to be bad at the more strategic part of the job, because you will get completely like buried in the details of all of these small things happening across your day. So one, the outcome of some of those small tactical things probably actually won't be great quality, but definitely on the strategic side, you either won't have time or you won't have the, bandwidth left for that kind of thinking. And in product management, that's a huge risk.
100%. I love the phrase in there as well of bandwidth, because ultimately, like, we don't have infinite capacity to think about things. I write about this point a lot because, I'm very critical of people using agile methods, agile rituals, let's say, without really thinking, like, do they make sense? Or focusing, for example, on agile rituals at the expense of strategy and asking, what are we building and why? Because my general point, which is not picked up by a lot of like the agile coaches out there, is that like we only have limited capacity, and we can only generally focus on one thing. And if we therefore like really obsess over story points, we are going to think about story points. We're not going to stop and think about the strategic side of things. And I think, as you said, also tying back to what I said earlier, it's actually easier to just fight fires because they're there in front of you. They appear on your plate and you don't need to go looking for them. But it's a lot harder to stop and think through these strategic things, which have like massive implications and are really complex and like full of uncertainty. And exactly as you said, like, you have to create space and really force yourself into that thinking. On that though, because I think this is people are aware of the importance, but find it very difficult to do. Like, are there any other specific tactics that you use to be effective in that way? Or do you feel that it's, because I know you've spent more than a decade in product management, how do you feel now it's just a habit that's ingrained in your thinking?
It's really, it depends on the nature of the role and how many other PMs are around you. So for me right now, I'm working in a really small organization. I'm basically the only senior level product person, which means that a lot of those like firefighting and task-oriented things like managing tickets and answering questions that, I would love to not be on my plate are definitely on my plate.
Right.
And so it's really interesting because I really have to be purposeful in saying like, no, this 2-hour block is for thinking about this thing for the future, because otherwise like my time will just get taken. So I've used varying tricks in the last number of.
Sorry, just to get really specific, do you block out your calendar with a thing?
So this was what I was going to say. So yeah, in some cases I block my calendar specifically where just like make sure that nobody interrupts me, but then also then I have this kind of cue, like I'm going to put my tools on do not disturb or silent mode so that I don't get notifications. Then I'm going to go so far as to hide the dock on my MacBook so that I don't see the notifications. I don't get distracted by them. I use the do not disturb mode on my computer, and I basically do all of the, tech enabled things to say, okay, I physically blocked this time in my calendar, and now I'm going to like take all of these extra steps to actually block the space.
Mm-hmm.
so that I have the time to think through things the way that I want to in that moment. And I really try to be, what's the word, like regimented with myself, that I don't break my own rules, because of course the whole thing is useless if then you sort of peek to the side and you see a little, red dot, and you're like, oh, just one email, but just one email like sends you down a rabbit hole. So having that kind of discipline is really tough.
Yeah, 100%. No, even I've always been really, really, really good with this. I've been like, I wouldn't say obsessed, but very militant with trying all of these like productivity and life hacks. But I think now that I'm dealing with sales stuff, I'm much more like, I should just check my email, just see what's come through. And I find it so, when you catch yourself being like, really? This is literally the stuff I like write about, tell people off for doing. And you find yourself doing the same thing. I think that as well, there's such a good point for anybody listening. People are going to look up to you as, very senior, like very experienced, like you really know what you're talking about when it comes to product leadership. But just being aware that whatever stage you're at, you always have these challenges. Right? You will always have to block out something in your calendar. You're always going to have to catch yourself, always have to say like, I need to just go for a quick walk. So it is a constant, it's a constant struggle, I think, whoever you are and whatever you've read and practiced.
I wanted to add one more thing to that. So in addition to blocking my calendar where I create space to do kind of like my own thinking and my own work, the other thing about making space for some of these more strategic topics is about I'd like to come up with like activities that will pull out the answers I need in order to make a set of strategic decisions. And this was something that I started doing as well when I lived in Australia. I think for some reason I thought that strategy was like, okay, you like set aside some time, you just like write some stuff down, and it just comes out of your brain. And this is not the reality of how strategic work happens at all. And so I really like to try and design interactive sessions for myself and my colleagues where I create a set of prompts that help me get out the information from people in different kinds of ways, so that then we can take those outputs and turn them into a strategy. And this is harder in a remote context, I will be totally honest.
Yeah. That sounds really interesting. I'd love to, if you send a few of those through, I'll add it in the virtual summit link as well. I'd love to check that out myself. Actually, that's not a problem I've solved. You touched upon a really interesting topic just there as well. Remote, like what trade-offs? What do you think how do you be an effective product manager? Do you think it can be fully remote? Do you have to do things in person?
Yeah, so I definitely believe in fully remote product management. I think, and in part, I'm biased in this direction because largely starting my career in the US, most of my counterparts were based elsewhere. So we had nearshore teams, we had offshore teams, we had third-party strategic partners, we had people located all over the US. And this, because I think I started my career in this kind of remote, distributed, even time zone distributed context, this is a really natural way of working for me, in fact. And actually, like when I would have started working, there weren't even good tools. There was like Skype, and that was it.
Oh, yeah.
There was Skype. And so my entire remote PM job was done over Skype, an occasional spreadsheet, and some really like early days tool tracking. Like Atlassian was still very small at this point. Basecamp had a product that we used at the time. So some of these like established players now were still quite new. It wasn't like everyone was using Jira.
Yeah. That's funny because I think I started just as Slack came in. So like 9 years ago, 8 years ago. And you forget. I mean, even then, actually, there wasn't like that many things around, but like Slack on its own, because I still speak to friends that work in traditional like law firms, and they're like, yeah, we just email everything.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just like, what the hell? How do you ever get anything done?
No, for sure. So for me, I think I got used to working in this kind of way, and especially because the teams were distributed across time zones. I think maybe this is why I like that kind of frantic multitasking, if you will, because what I had to do was try and set up my workday so that I could sort of progressively unblock a team as they came to work that day. So I would have to sort of like get started early in the morning and work with European colleagues so that I could unblock them before they signed off, and then do some work to unblock my team in the US. And then in the evening, do some work to unblock the team that was going to come online in India. And this is like a completely insane schedule. I don't recommend it, but it created a way of working that was really focused on enabling the team and clearing blockers in a really like kind of consistent and responsive way.
Yeah. I can imagine that's quite a good, what do you call it? Gauntlet, when you're already put through your paces for by having to manage like all these moving parts and different
you only mess up like 1 or 2 times because you realize like, oh crap, I lost like an entire 24 hours because I didn't respond in time. Never going to do that again. So you only have these small moments, and then you think, okay, I got this now. I know how to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think on that, it's a really, I'm just thinking for people listening as well, like it is, maybe from an outsider perspective, I feel like it's not something that I would recommend multitasking for people that are relatively new to product management, because I think, as I said, I think there's so much that comes from experience, obviously. So I think in your case, it's like you probably understand like what are the pieces, how are they fitting together. You sort of know what kind of blockers people are going to be having because you've worked with different teams, designers, developers, BI, whatever. So I think, personally, I think from my experience, it is good, particularly if you're relatively junior, to try and block out time for this strategic stuff. But even if, something I talk about a lot in the Prod MBA is there's quite a big gap, right, between junior, mid-level to senior, because there's this strategy gap. So I always try and say, like, how can you start moving towards, so for example, like even if you're in a role where you can't work on strategy, but you know that at some point in your career, you're going to have to do that. Like, how can you carve out time to really focus on that? Like, is it half an hour before work, or you're maybe just looking at the theory side of things? Are you trying to introduce a couple of things like workshops? That I don't know what it is, for example. I suppose, roundabout way of saying, for people that are junior or mid-level product managers, product owners, like, what would you recommend? Would you recommend anything to help them try to, let's say, step up into these more senior roles?
Yeah, so that's also a really tough question.
Yeah.
I think what I might suggest is maybe the best starting point is if you were to take a look at, say, the batch of tickets that are in your sprint, or the ones that you would expect to come into your next sprint. So maybe look 1 sprint ahead. Mm-hmm. And I really think that maybe trying to really think through, like, what problem does each of these or this group of things solve? Like, who is it for? What value does it bring to the business? When do we think that we would see the impact? And even just applying that kind of thinking to, like, even just each batch of tickets in the sprint, I think would start getting you thinking in the right kind of direction.
Yeah, that's great advice. I also love that. I wrote down that group of things. I think that's the key to strategy. Is like, how does this all fit together? And like, what kinds of things fit together that we say yes to, and what's the other group of things we say no to? Exactly. I think starting to just think about that, even if you feel you might not be able to, put it into practice, let's say, in your current role. Well, look, Merissa, I think that was a great place to finish off. I think that was a really, really enjoyable conversation. Actually, I learned a couple of things as well on the nature of leadership. And yeah, I'd love to link through the resource you mentioned, some of those workshops you use. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for anyone listening for listening to this part of our Prod MBA Virtual Leadership Summit series with Merissa Silk, product lead at Fundingport.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Henry.